Education is crucial for a sustainable future. It reduces poverty and inequality and creates economic opportunities. Although education is central to personal and social development, it is also the most underfunded sustainable development goal. Despite important progress in the last decades, education and training systems around the world have still not succeeded in providing equitable and quality education for all.
Today, the world is in the midst of a global education crisis. 222 million children had their right to an education ripped from their hands by the multiplying impacts of conflict, climate change, and other protracted crises. Out of this number, an estimated 78 million are out of school altogether, more than the total populations of France, Thailand, or South Africa. 671 million children and adolescents worldwide cannot read. That's more than 8% of the world's total population.
As a result, children lack the foundational skills necessary for further education and training throughout their lives. That's an entire generation at risk of being lost.
Education systems face colossal challenges. COVID-19 related school closures and contact restrictions have had a devastating impact on children, teachers, and parents, while it has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, the number of children with learning difficulties has increased to an estimated 584 million, which has erased 2 decades of prior progress.
Conflict and post-conflict situations create some of the main barriers to education through direct conflict and destruction, or displacement and recruitment of child soldiers, among others.
Natural disasters such as droughts and floods impact access to and quality of education, either indirectly through increased poverty, displacement, and health issues, or directly through damaged or destroyed learning infrastructure and roads.
As learners often cannot afford the direct and indirect costs of education, poverty remains one of the main reasons for not having access to education. Economic crises, budget cuts, and the lack of funding create additional challenges to education systems. Inflation is on the rise globally, and economic perspectives are worsening, which makes addressing this challenge all the more essential.
Switzerland has been committed to the right to education for many years. Both basic as well as vocational education and training are important cornerstones of Switzerland's international cooperation. Today, the International Cooperation Forum unites expertise from different fields to develop innovative solutions for challenges in the education sector.
It seeks to empower young people through education by teaching them the basic skills necessary for their general and professional education throughout their lives. Without education, there is no economic growth, neither at home nor abroad.
By teaching them future skills. Without future-oriented education, there is no research or innovation, neither at home nor abroad.
And by teaching them how to solve complex problems and to act. Tackling the climate, energy, and hunger crisis requires education and empowered young people.
Switzerland is a leader in innovation, research, and economic development. With its dual system, it can make a great contribution to resilient education systems. Education for Future is therefore the focus of the 2023 IC Forum and of the present time.
Let's address these challenges together and explore concrete and different approaches and solutions.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the International Cooperation Forum, Education for Future. Welcome to all of you here in Geneva, and of course, the many of you who are joining us online. My name is Claire Doul.
Hallo zusammen, my name is Nora Wilhelm.
Bonjour, my name is Lucky Natil.
Buenas tardes.
Buon pomeriggio.
We are multilingual moderators, but we are going to guide you through the program. However, there are professional translators in French and German.
Today, as we heard, is all about education for future. As the video reminded us, Sustainable Development Goal number 4 is the least funded of them all. We are not making enough progress on securing an equitable and quality education for all.
This forum aims to share different approaches and solutions. We will be hearing from speakers from all 4 corners of the globe and to find out what works in their own context.
There's going to be plenty of time to engage. There is slido.com, and if you're in the room, please take out your mobile phones and you can take a picture, as we see on the screen, of that QR code. If you're joining us from home, then go to slido.com and the event code is #ICForum.
We also know that there are over 2,700 people logging online to join us here today in Geneva. And over 120 countries have registered to participate in today's conference. Accordingly, we will be asking specific questions to this large online audience, to all of you, and we will make sure that your voices are heard. So via Mentimeter, you'll be having the opportunity to answer some questions, and Lucina and myself will relay your input and your feedback on this stage in Geneva here today.
And everyone, of course, don't forget also to tweet using the #ICForumCH and Youth for Solutions. So, all right, we will just dive in now, and I wish you a beautiful conference.
Thank you.
So now it's my great pleasure to welcome on stage our first speaker of today, Patricia Danzi, the Director General of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. Welcome.
Thank you. That's okay.
So, Patricia, tell me, what do you expect from today's forum?
Thank you for having such a young, dynamic moderator, and thank you for coming to Geneva, et bienvenue à tout le monde qui est avec nous online. So what do I expect? I expect that we are all experts. We all went to school. We had teachers, good ones, bad ones. We then moved on, but education kind of shaped what we are today. So we are the experts. The challenges are huge. We have seen it in the video: pandemics, wars, crises, earthquakes. Everything touches on education and on what we become after that, or if we don't have it, what we don't become. Now, what I expect is that this collective intelligence in the room and online, we have people from the private sector, financial sector, we have young people, more experienced people, we have people from the public sector too, we have NGOs, civil society, and we have the potential to make international cooperation better on the subject of education. And that's what I expect. So please discuss, bring in what you have, what your experience has brought, what you bring to this room, what you bring online, so we will be better when we get out.
Thank you. And what role does education play in sustainable development?
Well, briefly, I could say that there is no sustainable development without education. Mm-hmm. We have SDG 4 lacking behind, so the Sustainable Development Goal on education is lacking behind, like many other Sustainable Development Goals too. So we have to make an effort to get there where we actually started. Because people who are educated, they have choices. You can choose what and how you invest, where you put your efforts, and how you can be more resilient to crisis. So if we want to really go on, we have to invest in education as well. It's an enabler for all the other goals.
Mm-hmm, completely, and at the same time, or like immediately after the IC Forum, there's also the Education Cannot Wait high-level financing conference happening. Can you explain to us what is the link between these two conferences?
Well, one of the links is we have more international experts. We have some excellencies, some ministers here, and that is absolutely perfect because it enriches this IC Forum very much. We also know that finance for education is low, so we wanted to be back-to-back to this pledging conference of Education Cannot Wait, to also leverage the impact of financing. And we are co-conveners together with Education Cannot Wait, with Colombia, with Germany, with Norway, with Niger, and with South Sudan. So we are forming an alliance to put efforts on education for the most vulnerable in the crisis of this world.
Thank you. We are really much looking forward, and we will hear from you again at the end today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will improvise.
Thank you, Lucina, and thank you, Patricia. And as we've all been hearing, SDG 4 is sadly the Sustainable Development Goal that's the least funded, and investment in sustainable, developmental, inclusive, resilient education is what this forum is all about. So let's move from finance to economy. And we're delighted that the director of the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs here in Switzerland, Hélène Boudliger-Artida, has this recorded message for us.
Good afternoon, warm greetings from Bern, the capital of Switzerland. My name is Hélène Boudliger-Artida. I'm the Swiss State Secretary for Economy. I would have loved to be with you in Geneva, and I also warmly greet everyone that's digital coming in from around the globe, just like myself. You might be wondering, why is the Swiss State Secretary for Economy talking about education? Well, that's relatively easy for me to answer. First of all, I meet a lot of companies, Swiss companies, but also foreign direct investors. And I ask them, why did you decide to come to Switzerland? And they very often tell me, reason number one is the highly qualified, very talented workforce of Switzerland. They get that human talent they need to be innovative and to be fast forward, looking towards the future. So human talent is incredibly important for a vibrant economic landscape. The second reason why it's important for the success of Switzerland is because Switzerland has a very diverse educational landscape. It's important to have these cutting-edge universities to do academic research at top level. It's also important for the Swiss government to invest in all types of research, also that very fundamental research where you don't necessarily see a commercial gain. But I think more importantly is also what we do at the other level of education. And I specifically go like this. It's not like this. So we do that cutting-edge academic frontier research, but we also have a very successful apprenticeship model in Switzerland. In fact, 2/3 of Swiss youth, they do not decide immediately for an academic career, but they start what is called a vocational educational system, an apprenticeship. So 2/3, so the majority of Swiss youth actually starts with that, and then has all sorts of possibilities to grow, either become a business owner or become an applied scientist, actually continue with studies, or become a master artisan. And I think that flexibility in the Swiss system is absolutely key. It also produces that really practical innovation, which is sometimes a niche, is maybe not very, very attractive sounding, but has, of course, contributed to Switzerland's wealth. And I guess my third point is vital to your conversations that you're going to have afterwards. UNESCO actually says if children would be allowed to finish secondary grade, poverty could be easily cut in half. There's other data that shows that should governments decide to invest into education, we could have a global growth of 10% in our economy. I think that's a staggering number. So, to sum it all up, education fights poverty, and it helps for us, for our economies to grow, to create value in society. And I think that is really important. And that's why it was an honor and a pleasure to speak to you. And I wish you fruitful conversations. Thank you very much.
So as we have heard from the director of SECO, Hélène Boudliger-Artida, investments in education are key to alleviate poverty and accelerate development. It is now my honor to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Mrs. Awut Deng Achwil, who is the Honorary Minister of General Education and Instruction of South Sudan. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and a warm greeting from South Sudan. And I want to thank the Swiss government for organizing this important conference to address issues of education.
Thank you so much for being here. My first question to you would be, can you share why is it so important from your point of view and expertise to invest in education?
I think education is so important if we are to make a difference all over the world. First, education empowers citizens, empower children, empower communities, and empower people. Today, we have a lot of challenges in the world that are threatening education, especially children who are in crisis. And I think you have seen the video. It can speak by itself. So it is important that the world make a U-turn to pay attention to the education. If we were not educated, we would have not been here today. We would have not been able to speak before you. I think it's a tool that empowers citizens to live their own life, to get them out from poverty. And if there is anything that we can invest in as people, it is education. And as a mother, every single thing I have in my hand, I have to invest for the children education so that tomorrow is going to be a better world.
Wow, thank you so much. I would love to ask you to share a little bit more about your perspective from South Sudan. What are the key challenges that you would say you are facing and the opportunities that you have found in addressing them?
I think every situation has a great opportunity, even in crisis. Sometimes make us to think on how to survive. So resilience is one of the key for us to overcome challenges. In South Sudan, we have a generation that has missed out during the liberation struggle. I think we have 2 generations who have not gone to school. We also have a recurrent flood, which is a clear indication of climate change. We are recovering from a 6-year conflict in the country. So with these challenges, with a little investment before in education, budget of education has always been the least funded, but we have moved away since last year. Our education budget today stands by 12.5% in South Sudan from the national government. And also, we try with our partners, and Swiss also play a major role in this, especially when it comes to TVET education. So we have taken a step, first, to improve the salary for teachers, because teachers were the least paid, so they left the professions. But today we are implementing 140% increment of teacher salary. Just last week, the president issued a presidential order to promote free education for all children in South Sudan, be it refugees, internally displaced person, children, or children who are out of school. We still have 2.8 children out of school in our country. And this is an enabling factor to make sure that every child has a chance to go to school. We also have children who have never seen a classroom in their life, in the communities that are completely cut off by infrastructure and what we call hard-to-reach areas, which have not seen anything before. We're also trying to get there to get education to them. The intention is not to leave anyone behind, because if we are to get out from the cycle of poverty, then we must empower our citizens through education and skills to be able to deliver to the country, but also, to live a better life. So these are steps we are taking, and more need to be done. There's still a lot of challenges. The national disasters are not stopping. They are still coming up. So I think it is important that Swiss government continue to stand with those in crisis. Children like in Syria now, in Turkey, countries that are affected by war, by natural disaster. It is our collective responsibility as government, as donors, as international partners to support these children. These are children that are going to lead these countries tomorrow as leaders.
Thank you so much. I'm really inspired by your work, your engagement, and the strides that you seem to be making in South Sudan. But not only that, you're leading the charge on a global scale with the Education Cannot Wait initiative and the high-level financing conference that is going to come up, which is co-hosted here by Switzerland and Education Cannot Wait, but also in close collaboration with your country, as well as Colombia, Germany, Norway, and Niger. Would you like to perhaps share a message with all the people who are here today? What would be kind of your message of inspiration for people to continue to fight for quality access to education for all?
I think my message to each and everyone, there are things we can do individually, and there are things we will do as government, as corporation, as countries. I think when you invest on a right thing, they turn out in that. The outcome is something that you can look back and appreciate and smile and say, that little child that was struggling to go to school in water or in a drought period or in places where they are displaced, they will be able to have a future tomorrow. So I think my message is that education can only bring us to things together. It is not one country that who can handle education. I think together, all of us, our mind must meet, our action must be united, our voices must be coordinated to make sure that we help this generation, we prepare them for a better future. So let us invest in education and give a voice, a hope, a future to 222 million children across the world who are yearning for this education. So whatever we can give to give a future, we should not hesitate, but act on the right time.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for giving us a window into your work in South Sudan and beyond, how you are really leading the way for quality education for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we are now turning our attention to another part of the globe. If the collection is live, is it? We are going to head over to Bolivia, and Amparo is here with us. Fantastic. Don't we love it when technology works out? So we will be hearing from Bolivia directly, as you can see on the screen, and you will later see on the larger one above, about how a challenge can become an opportunity for positive change. We will hear about vocational training, a project that they have been implementing there. And if you would like to ask a question, do not hesitate to submit it via Slido. As a reminder, you can just go on Slido and use the hashtag ICForum to find a place to submit your questions. If you need translation, a part of this will be in Spanish. Do grab your headsets. Mrs. Amparo, welcome. The word is yours.
Thank you. I am Amparo Ergueta. I am a National Program Officer at SDC. I am in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and I am so excited to present the experience of our center, ENSEC. Well, the Vocational Education and Training Project was supporting this center since 2018, and with the assistance of Swiss Contact and Pautapo. We will show you how, with our support, this center continue education and modernize the courses. This is one of 72 centers that are being supported by Switzerland. Let's see the whole experience in this short video.
Fantastic. Roll film.
In Bolivia, Swiss Development Cooperation is strengthening 72 state-run technical training centers. The centers were closed in March 2020 because of COVID-19. To keep the training going, the project implemented some innovative measures. The teachers were committed to learning how to use digital platforms, and the students were flexible. The centres were adapted, classrooms were equipped, and contents for remote training courses were developed. Virtual simulators were installed for practical training. And internet connections were set up for all low-income students so that they could attend classes on their mobile phones. Distance was no object.
Es necesaria We need the cooperation, the strategic alliance between the public sector and support from the international corporations in order to strengthen training in the technical and technological institutes.
This meant that 10,000 students could keep on studying and improve their chances of finding a job. Digital skills training is now an integral part of technical training. The students at the technical training centres now have a better grasp of technology and will be able to use it when they go out to work. Technical training works.
Bien, ahora me encuentro dentro de una de las clases. Me encuentro con la directora académica de ENSEC y ella nos va a contar cómo ha sido la adaptación.
We are now with the director of this institution you heard about in the film and in very many other institutions that we support as well, where all this change has taken place, allowing also for virtual classes. Thank you and welcome to ENSEC, our institution. Within the scope of the pandemic, we had to stop, we were forced to stop giving actual classes and we had to develop new methods. And thanks to the cooperation with very many supporters and partners, this became possible and we were able to offer free online classes. Several digital platforms were made available to us free of charge, and we also were able to develop our own platforms. And we realized how important it is to train with regard to using such digital platforms and also to adapt learning materials. We were supported by Swiss Development Corporation so that everyone also had access to laptops in order to partake in this project. Everything was carried out very interactively. We had what we like to refer to as a laboratory. We also had our own server installed. It was very important to us to have our own platform with our very own server. All of this contributed to classes being able to continue with no interruption of the courses so that further education could be ensured. Great. That was one of the experiences that the director just told us about. Now we'd like to speak with one of the teachers who is responsible for, amongst other, for classes on corporate management. How did you adapt to using the new technological possibilities? Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Escarlén Moyanome, and I'm a professor for business administration at ENSEC. It was very important for us all to be able to test and try these new teaching methods. We came together and we had to ensure further online classes during the pandemic because it was impossible for the students to attend actual physical classes and lectures. And as you know, the pandemic also led to several different kinds of social issues and problems. But thanks to the competencies we were able to acquire, our students were able to continue their education and to actually finalize their courses and then also find gainful employment. Thank you very much. It's important to know, to hear about all of the challenges, but also to know about the challenges that the young people and students had to face. We know that it's very costly to have internet access in Bolivia and that connections aren't always stable. So let's speak with a young person who was impacted by all of these challenges. It's a young lady who did a class in bookkeeping during the pandemic and actually also finished this course. Thank you very much. Very many colleagues and friends of mine interrupted their education because they didn't have laptops, they didn't have internet connection, they didn't have Wi-Fi. But some of us were lucky. We had our parents who helped us to continue our education. We also found support elsewhere. We were given access to different computers, for instance, and during the pandemic, what was very, very important was to adopt a very solidaric behavior and to help one another and to support one another mutually. I would never have been able to finish my accountancy class without a computer and without internet access, but this was possible thanks to a lot of support, which I'm very grateful for. Right. What about the young gentleman? This young gentleman next to me was also impacted by all of these challenges during the pandemic, and now we'd like to hear from him. He also wanted to be able to finish his course. What was your experience like? Which situation did you find yourself in? Thank you. Well, I'd say that the biggest obstacle to tackle, the biggest difficulty for me, was that within the scope of this project, we lacked the materials we needed. We had no access to the different platforms. So it was very hard to acquire the knowledge we wanted to acquire. And, well, I'm speaking here about a period of 2 years during which there were no actual classes. During this period, I stayed at home, but I was supported, I was helped, and this made it possible for me to attend classes remotely on digital platforms. And what about practical training then? Actually, I did a form of internship as well. And I was able to acquire very hands-on practical knowledge. I'd like to hand back to Switzerland. I think Nora just received a Slido question, so we'll try and respond. Nora. Yes, thank you very much. What an interesting project, this Bolivian project. It was great to have heard from educators, but also from students. But we did just receive a Slido question, namely, what were the key factors for success, for the success of the Bolivian Vocational Education Project? And what about the employability of graduates? Let's ask the director of the institution whether she'd like to respond with regard to the use of these new technologies. Thank you. I do believe that the decisive elements for success were that everyone involved was committed, everyone contributed. The authorities, administration, the students, all teachers and educators. This made it possible to not suffer major interruptions to the classes and courses, but we, primarily the educators, had to learn to use new tools, new platforms, new methods in order to continue to educate. And the support that we received was a great, great help to us all here at my institution and also elsewhere. So, also the materials and infrastructure provided to us were tremendously helpful. Infrastructure in Bolivia was improved upon. We received computers, tablets. That was all tremendously helpful to us. And I can say that all third-year students in their graduate year also did internships and acquired a lot of practical and hands-on knowledge. And basically, our institution is highly recognized amongst others also for this, and this translates into higher employability and better opportunities on the labor market. And we also have a lot of businesses and companies who come and visit us and our students at our institution, which is a door opener for them. Thank you very much. We've received so very many questions. I doubt that we'll be able to answer them all, but allow me to ask this question. Very many countries have made huge progress in terms of digitalization. So this is a question for the educator, for the professor here next to me. What will things look like now in the period post-pandemic? Right. Thank you very much. It's a massive challenge, in my opinion, to familiarize yourself with all of these new methods and methodologies. But I do believe that these newly acquired competencies and skills will continue to remain very helpful for us as teachers, educators, professors, for all of the work to follow. I think it was a tremendous step in the right direction. Thank you very much. That was only a tiny example of all of the work undertaken here in Bolivia on site within the scope of this program. Thank you so very much. We're really, really proud to be part of today's forum. Thank you very much, and bye-bye. Thank you so much, our entire team in Bolivia. Thank you so very much for your inspiration here today.
Yes. So let's move to another part of the world. Syria, as we know, has been hard hit for many years by conflict and natural disasters. And it's estimated that 450 schools have been affected in the recent earthquake that hit the Turkish-Syrian region. Of course, across the country, schools and universities have been damaged due to the conflict, the long civil war. We're now going to go to eastern Syria, where Caritas has a project to bring hope to many young Syrian pupils. Let's watch the video.
12 years after the outbreak of the civil war, the Syria crisis continues to be one of the most complex crises across the world, with nearly 15 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. Throughout Syria, children and adolescents are in urgent need of protection and access to education. More than 2 million children do not go to school, and another 1.3 million children are at risk of dropping out of school without having basic skills such as reading and writing. Children are exposed to great risks such as child labor, domestic violence, or early marriage. The lack of qualified teaching staff is problematic. Teachers face enormous challenges such as the lack of teaching materials and the needs of children in terms of psychosocial support. In the eastern Ghouta region alone, 40% of school infrastructure is partially or completely destroyed. In collaboration with Caritas, Switzerland addresses barriers to school attendance resulting from the civil war in this region of Syria. Since 2021, Sidra is one of the children who's benefiting from this program in Java. By engaging in remedial non-formal education and psychosocial support sessions, Sidra was able to progress in her academic journey over the years. Due to her participation in various educational activities, Sidra became more capable to support her siblings who were struggling with different learning difficulties. In 2023, Sidra and other children are continuing their education, paving the way for a hopeful, brighter future.
Before, the classrooms were severely damaged, but then Caritas came and renovated the school in the best possible way. During formal school hours, we struggled to learn, but when attending remedial classes, everything got better. The teachers have helped us to learn. The subjects in the program were Arabic, mathematics, English and science. And there was a session for psychosocial support activities, where we learned from the program staff.
Together with its implementing partners, Switzerland stays engaged to support access and completion of inclusive, protective, quality, compulsory education for conflict-affected and vulnerable children and adolescents. This is in combination with improved prospects for livelihood and income for their families in order to strengthen the resilience of local communities.
Well, we've seen there about the impact of conflict on schools. I think everybody in the room most probably knows about the impact of COVID on schools because, of course, so many schools around the world shut down. So I think the big question now is, how do we build resilient and inclusive education systems that are fit for the future? And with me to discuss this, and I'm going to go from the end first, is Chiara Mavulio, who's the Engagement and Communication Lead at Botner. Many of you in Switzerland will know that it's a very well-known foundation that promotes artificial intelligence, the use of and digital tools to promote health and well-being amongst young people. Welcome, Chiara. Next to Chiara is Mohammed Habib, an ambassador for the 1 Million Youth Action Challenge. And Mohammed is a climate leader in Ghana and goes into schools and really motivates children to be environmentally friendly and to save the planet. Welcome, Mohammed. And Ursula Reynolds, a former State Secretary for Professional Education and Technology here in Switzerland, and is now Professor of Education Systems at the Swiss Federal Institute in Zurich. Welcome, Ursula. And I'm very, very delighted to be joined by Dr. Azmi Mahafsa, who's Jordan's Minister of Education and Higher Education and Scientific Research, so a very big portfolio there, Minister. And I'm going to start by asking you to say a few words about the efforts in Jordan to bring a really resilient education system for young learners from primary right up to tertiary education.
First of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk in this very important forum. And I would say, as humanity is facing an extraordinary, fast and unfolding challenges, it's imperative that we all work together to activate the full potential of human capabilities and bring about best innovative and creative solutions through forward-looking, transformative, inclusive, and resilient education. Over decades, Jordan has been the host to refugees following multiple humanitarian crises across the Middle East, and it's the third largest host country of Syrian refugees. For Jordan, providing enabling, safe, healthy, and accessible learning environments and support systems for all children and youth is a top priority, with special emphasis on children vulnerable to exclusion from and within education, including children with disabilities and refugee children. This was reiterated in the 10-year Inclusive Education Strategy 2020-2030, as well as the recently endorsed Jordan Declaration on Inclusion and Diversity in Education. The Ministry of Education aims to build on past experiences and lessons learned in crisis and risk management, including that gained during COVID-19, to further develop strategies and guidance to assess, prevent, and prepare for and mitigate natural and man-made hazards. And it's finalizing a crisis and risk management plan based on international guidance on emergency response and preparedness and contingency planning that's aligned with Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience in the education sector.
Thank you very much, Minister. Indeed, I think we're all aware of the surrounding countries of Syria and how they host many refugees and ensure an inclusive education system for refugees. And you've mentioned again about forward planning. I think we'll come back to that in a moment. What I would like to ask you is about COVID and what sort of impact did COVID have on education in Jordan, whether at primary level or all the way to tertiary education?
Other than its immediate health consequences, the pandemic has affected all aspects of life in Jordan as well as in other countries of the world, being social, cultural, economic, or political. And the global disruption to education by the pandemic is unparalleled. And it brought schools in Jordan to a complete halt for probably more than 70% of the teaching period through 2021-22. And many effects were evident immediately: difficulty in shifting to online education, the divide gap, the technical gap was very evident, low enrollment in kindergartens, which is really newly added to the compulsory education, dropout, increased dropout, interruption in academic as well as vocational education. So education was hardly hit by the pandemic. The learning loss was significant. It's very large, 70% of students falling behind in grade competences, as well as an overall 33% of grade level learning. So the pandemic has impacted education very significantly.
Thank you, Minister, and I think those words will resonate with many of us who in our countries have seen the impact of COVID on education. I'm going to ask everybody just to take a step back because otherwise you can see we're all in a line. And I'm going to want to hear from Mohammed because we've heard about the serious impact of COVID in Jordan. Mohammed, as an observer, what did you see about the impact of COVID on education in Ghana?
Okay, thank you very much. Even before COVID-19, there were serious challenges on developmental and educational system on school children in Ghana. But COVID-19 has just come to worsen that. Yes, schools were closed between January 2020 to March 2021, affecting children and parents as a whole. There was a survey made in Ghana which indicates that at least one student or one child experienced a hunger just at least once a day because of closure of schools, because there were a school feeding program in Ghana which has to be suspended because of COVID. And that has really affected them a lot. And also, because of lack of digital divide in Ghana, there were no virtual classrooms available for both children and to university levels. They have to skip their lessons which also affect them greatly. It even came to a time whereby school children start to lose interest just because they are in home for so long. So I would say it has really affected Ghana a lot.
Absolutely, yes, we can see digital divide, and I think we'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment. Ursula, I'm just wondering, with your hat on as an education systems expert, first of all, have you got any response to what the Minister and Mohammed have been saying about the impact of COVID in Jordan and Ghana? And then I know that you've been doing some research in Nepal, US, Switzerland, about the impact on vocational training as well as in the education system. So a few words from you, please.
Thanks, Claire. Yes, I could react first to Minister's talk, which I really highly appreciated. I would say, and also from Mohamed, about the impact. In some countries, it was just a tipping point of the iceberg, because the youth is anyway in a dangerous situation in a lot of countries. And this has shown us now how difficult it is for certain groups. If I would judge the education system, I really would make kind of distinction between whether we talk about compulsory education, upper secondary or tertiary. The better you are educated, the more you can kind of cope with the difficulties. The most affected countries are those with a total lockdown, where everything was closed. In Switzerland, we had a shutdown. We have never really had a lockdown, which is an advantage. But if schools are closed, then definitely that's a big issue. I speak a little bit about compulsory education and maybe upper secondary education. If schools are closed for 2 to 3 years, that's an extremely impactful change in your life, because people are 3 years out of maybe 9 years in such a situation. Guess what this means for their psychological status. So what we see, and there is more research coming up about the psychological stage of young people, I'm concerned about that we underestimate the post-pandemic situation of the young generation. Where I could tell you where the situation is slightly better, and this is what we see in our research in the United States, in Nepal, and in Switzerland, that is when you expose students in the upper secondary and maybe tertiary level to the workplace learning. Because normally a lot of sectors were still working under this protection measure, and we see in the US that OJT, on-the-job training and apprenticeship were going on, and people were resilient. The same, by the way, in Switzerland, with the exception of hotellerie and gastronomy. All sectors were kind of good in keeping going and try to recover what they have lost as learning content. And even in Nepal, the program where they expose people to workplace learning, that works. The rest had a problem. So in that regard, I would say my concern is what are we doing with the young generation so that we can help them to get into, because the good side, if I may say that, the good side, what we have seen in the video of Bolivia, technology revolution has happened in a lot of countries and in a lot of schools. This is the good message. The other side is that we are human beings and we need social contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting that you could say the industry got their act together because they're involved in vocational training, but with schools, they really didn't adapt quick enough. There's this whole, idea of a COVID reset, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And I'm just wondering, Ursula, do you think that we need a COVID reset in the education system? What do we need to do differently?
Well, first of all, Mohammed has said that there is a digital divide. Mm-hmm. It was there before COVID, and it's still there because a lot of countries do not, or a lot of individuals do not have appropriate access to digital tools and to a good internet connection. And if we know that the digital transformation is the fastest driver in the labor market, I would say this is an extremely important aspect for the future to help all the countries that they have equal access to online tools. Because what we see now in education system post-pandemic is that you don't get rid of this online learning, so that will be a part of the future education. And that means we have to make sure that every country really has a kind of access.
Chiara, to bring you into the discussion, because of course you're all about promoting health and well-being. What is your view of the analysis of Ursula, that industry might have adapted, but education, we haven't really seen the reset, and of course, as we've been mentioning, there is this digital divide.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks so much, Claire, and really a pleasure to be here and to hear everybody's perspectives. I think for us at Fundación Botna, it's, reflecting on the COVID pandemic, it's not only an opportunity for a reset, but we would even argue a rethink altogether. Hearing about Mohammed and the experiences of lockdowns and school closures and lack of being able to access online education as many schools were slow or just even unable to adapt to the changing demands of the consequence of the pandemic, is really for us to perhaps rethink what are we educating young people for? Is it to maintain and to grow an economic model of linear growth? Or is it really to prepare young people to be resilient, not so much to cope, but to be able to navigate what is clearly an ever-changing and uncertain world? And for us at the Foundation, it's given us an opportunity to exactly rethink also how we consider well-being. What does well-being mean to us and to the young people that we're trying to work with and for? And for us, taking a deeply relational approach means understanding the linkages and fostering relationships between the individual, the community and the society, and the environment at large. And we're learning together with a lot of our partners on how they are able to do this. We have some partners that we're learning with together in Morocco, in the region of Tangier, Tamkeen, maybe some of you know them. And they have taken this deeply relational approach over the last, more than 10 years for what they call humanizing education or humanizing society, and how to bring these values of dignity and respect and tolerance more, not only into the infrastructure of the school environment, but into the community in which it's embedded. And for the schools that are participating in this program, it means different things to different...
It would be really good, because it sounds great, doesn't it? Dignity, respect, love, but what does that concretely look like? What are they doing that may be different to what schools in Morocco did before?
It's what they call the Tamkeen approach, and every school works together with the students, with the teachers, with the community to develop initiatives or responses in order to foster these relationships more deeply between the different systems at play. So, for example, in one school, it's about a model United Nations. It's about creating that environment where children and young people foster skills around collaboration, problem solving. For others, it's a community-based library, an intergenerational library that connects students with often elderly women in the community for an opportunity to exchange, listen and learn, and foster these deep values that I think are fundamental to progressing and evolutionizing.
You've really struck a chord there, because this must be an Arab brotherly moment here for once you start talking about the project in Morocco. Minister, you wanted to come in and say something.
It is not enough to talk about the impact of COVID-19. Yeah. We should treat the aftermath on education. I believe the learning loss was aggravated significantly by COVID-19. And we need remediation. We need programs, strategies, planning to remediate the learning loss, especially in low and middle income countries where it reaches, as I said, 70%. So there is a need, bad need to, because this is a long-term effect. It will last for years. Probably Professor Asola can comment on this. We need decades to make up for this learning loss of 2 years on such children. So remediation and managing the learning loss should be given a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's bring Ursula in. How do we make up for that time? And then I have another question that's come to mind for Chiara. But yeah, how do we make up the time lost?
Well, exactly. I think this is an address to what my concern is, that I think how can we help the young people to overcome their psychological problem? They need love. They need to be respected. They need dignity. They need an embracement. They need social and informal contacts. And therefore, that's now the tricky part. That is not only solved by digital tools. No, you need this physical kind of interaction. And so the solution is in the future, you need both, for the efficiency and get access to education, digital tools are important. But in my view, what they addressed for resilience is extremely important. What I can say from the data, and this is basically driven by the fast pace of the digital transformation in the future, in all education system, is it university or TVET or compulsory school, first and foremost, what is more important are so-called soft skills. Why? Because the soft skills we call as transferable skills. If you once has experienced love, dignity, respect, you can learn. It's your attitude, and you live with that, and you can educate the next generation. So the soft skills are transferable skills, and if you once have learned them, you can take it with you. It's different with hard skills. And that's why what we see in the data, there is no way without embracing soft skills as one of the most important skills. And I mean, respect, dignity, all these aspects, love or empathy are linked to what we call this 21st century.
And Minister, are you putting a focus then on soft skills? I remember many years ago moderating a panel at OECD, and there was a woman from Siemens, so, I'm thinking engineers, and she said exactly that. We don't need people necessarily who've studied engineering, but who have the adaptability and these soft skills. Is this something that you're putting a focus on?
Yes, soft skills are very important, and this requires more than one level of intervention. We need curriculum change. We need curriculum development to address this issue. We need teacher training as well, which is the most important factor probably in transforming education. We need to work on the Transforming Education Initiative or Summit by preparing for different curricula, different teaching methodologies, and teacher training.
And I was wondering, Chiara, I'd come back to you, Ursula. I was just thinking, is your foundation then working also on teachers, and changing their approach, and that teachers are not just teaching, but they're having to do many other things too?
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think through a lot of our partners and programs, it's a collaborative approach. You need all stakeholders, you need all partners to work together to achieve whatever transformation it is that's undergoing. So it's exactly taking this relational approach between the individual, the teachers, the peers, the parents, the school environment, and so forth. So absolutely, it takes it really from every direction.
Ursula.
Yeah, I would like to react regarding teacher training. I would say you are faster if you embrace the employment sector as a learning location. Why? For soft skills, all the research show that the employment sector is a better place to learn this kind of soft skills because you have different role models with good and bad behavior in the employment sector, and young people can learn what is my style, Schools are not the best learning location to learn soft skills. So this is a problem. The second point, teacher. Teacher education is a hard topic. So I was responsible for a teacher education in teacher university in Switzerland for 5 years, and we had to change digital tools and devices. I can tell you, with young teacher, I agree with you, but with the rest of the teachers who are in the field, it's very hard.
Pre-service.
I recommend that you also there try to work in a collaboration with instructors from a company who are at the forefront of new technology and can bring it from a practical point of view. Because we should not stigmatize teachers that they are not doing a good job. We depend on them, but changing towards a totally different job as a teacher is so difficult. So that I would recommend that my solution is all over, beyond compulsory education, embrace the workplace as a learning location.
Mohammed, you mentioned in your opening remarks about the digital divide. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and where it really is in Ghana?
Well, thank you very much. You can usually find that in the rural areas, though in urban areas, some people too are facing these challenges. In the rural areas, you can see it physically, whereby people don't have access to internet connectivity and even basic computers. There are some instances, if they have access to these computers, there will not be sustainable energy to access these computers. Even, I'm talking about internet connectivity. Even if it is everywhere in the country, both rural and urban areas, there are financial restraints which can prevent a lot of people from accessing this computer and internet connectivity. So I would say in Ghana, to my assumption, more than 50% don't have access to this computer and internet connectivity. Yes, so there is a lot of digital device in my country.
Yeah, so as we see, digitalization, it comes with advantages. It was a lifeline during COVID for some, but there's a big divide. We've seen that it's also about teacher training. One other issue to just throw into the discussion, Chiara, you come from the health world, and we know there's been a lot of concern about the privacy of health data. Where do you see those concerns perhaps in education? Because we're using digital tools if we have the access to them, but who owns the data?
Yeah, that's a tough one, Claire. I think, I mean, we've had quite some experience in the health sector at the foundation, particularly around health data governance and exactly balancing what is clearly a huge opportunity with data for digital connectivity and data, that we can learn so much from having the data and making the connections and seeing patterns and generating insights. But at the same time, we do have to balance the responsibility and the risk to what we, to the privacy aspects of that data. And for us, I mean, it's something we're very interested in learning more about in the education sector. We see that possibly there is a risk of perhaps profiling students or young people depending on their learning outcomes. And I think we have to remember that we have a responsibility not to deprive the agency of young people in determining their own learning journeys, their own learning pathways. And so possibly it's something we would be very interested to explore if others were there. We have, as I said, quite some experience in the health sector, but we're wondering if this is also an emerging risk in the education sector.
More research needs to be done on this, I assume, Ursula, because perhaps educators are not so aware of the risks of data privacy in education.
Absolutely, yes. No, we are at the beginning of the awareness, I would say, and it's dangerous. Yeah. So I have the opinion the data should, that the individual should be the owner of the data, but only if you educate them what to do with the data. It can be helpful. It can be helpful, but if they don't know how to use it and at what time they want to share it with others, then it's a problem. It's all about education.
In a few minutes, I'm going to take some questions which are coming in from Slido, so thank you. I just want to address a future challenge, although for many of us it's not future, it's happening now, which is climate change. Minister, in your remarks, you were talking about digital tools that can be used for planning and preparedness to mitigate some of the risks. A few words on what you're doing.
Yeah, we enjoyed that utilized one of the systems, OpenEMS for learning management as learning management system. And we developed an education during emergency plan response. And in this regard, technology is essential for effective risk governance, especially for the complex and potentially systemic hazards stemming from climate change. Climate change could be, other than its tremendous effects, the source of new pandemics, and that's well known. An understanding of the risks and current and future impacts of climate change is needed before developing and implementing approaches to reduce and manage the associated risk and losses of the climate change. And observations and modeling of the climate system and forecasting capabilities can inform the characterization of risk. Technologies will provide, in this case, the underpinning for evaluating risks, as well as developing approaches to reduce and manage those risks. As risks are always evolving, an iterative process of monitoring, evaluation, and learning can inform both understanding and management of these risks over time. So technology can play a very essential role in risk assessment and management.
Yes, and as you rightly say, there's climate change, and with climate change also comes risks of other pandemics. Let me bring in then Mohammed, who really is our climate change expert on this panel, because I said that you were going into schools, you were helping children save the planet, but just tell us exactly what are you doing with these children?
Okay, thank you very much. As a 1 Million Youth Action Challenge ambassador, we have laid down standard action where you can put it on in schools, in communities for a successful project. So what I do is I go to schools, interact with educators and children in a school. Usually I have to seek permission with school heads to get access to schools. And when I acquire those accesses, what I believe is teaching them practically rather than theoretically, which is we sometimes go into basic tree planting, recycling, to the extent we sometimes create a nursery plants garden, whereby the children do it themselves. So that's what we do in the schools for now. And I think it's helping, because I believe when you teach students practically, they learn faster than when you just go to the board, start writing, explaining things to them without showing them what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning by doing, Ursula. Very important that children can do something practical themselves to counter these many challenges, such as climate change.
Absolutely. We need more Mohammeds around the world, I have to say. Yes, because...
There we are.
Why? Because it's so depressive making for young people to see the disaster around the world. I mean, I have to say, and then North-South is another issue, I would say. That means that you, in your geopolitical area, you suffer much more than actually we do. But we should help together. And I fully agree that if you not only teaches what is the physics behind, the temperature and so on, but also help them to say what you can do. That's extremely important for each young person. And it brings us back a little bit to TVET, the practical part where they can do something, where they can create their own life is extremely helpful for a young person to start a career.
TVET is?
Technical Vocational Education and Training.
Thank you.
Okay, I say on teachers and students, because this forum itself is based on education. We sometimes go into the communities to do it practically, not only in schools.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's very good. I like it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's look at some of your questions that are coming in. Well, Hugh says, citation, please, but this seems like a really good quote to me anyway, which was Ursula said, schools are not the best place to learn soft skills. Perhaps he means clarification, because it looks like a good tweet, that one. A short clarification, Ursula.
Yes. Soft skills are basically problem solving, working under pressure, anticipation, teamwork, good communication skill, respect, dignity, love, and all that. And our studies, which we done in Switzerland, but also in other countries like the United States, they were showing that the best place to learn these types of skills is in the workplace. Because if you have a class with 24 people and one teacher, the students, the pupils, have one role model. If you have a good teacher, you have a good chance. If you don't have a good teacher with regard to this behavior, then how can you learn it? Soft skill, training soft skill. I've tried to develop some teaching learning arrangements to teach soft skill. It's so difficult because the baseline of students are different. They may have in their childhood get some very good soft skills from their parents or from the neighborhood, and others did not. So you have not, as in mathematics, the same standard when they enter your class. Now, how can you develop soft skills when you have so many different standards with regard to a certain soft skill? If you then go to the workplace, there you have role models. You're embedded in an adult world with good and bad behavior, and that means the student can independently learn what is good behavior and what is bad behavior. So if you bring me your card, then I can send you the study.
Well, thank you, Hugh. I think you got a comprehensive and clear answer there. There's a question for you, Minister. Dr. Azmi, how is the education situation in the Syrian refugee camps in Jordan?
They receive the same education for other Jordanian children. They receive the same school, the same curricula, the same teachers. Sometimes we revert to part-time teachers because of the lack of enough teachers, but they receive the same education, the same quality of education.
Quality and equity, absolutely. Education for Future must develop sustainable mindsets and skills for dealing with problems of climate change. How is international cooperation tackling this? That sounds like a PhD thesis. Does anybody want to take that one? Ursula, you've taken the mic.
Well, I would agree that all donor partners should get together to think about how they can stimulate that, because the climate change is obviously for students or pupils a very abstract term, and it needs a little bit knowledge to understand what is the climate change and where does this happen, and then, as Mohamed said, how can you react to this? So for me, the theoretical part, content production is not the most difficult thing. The most difficult thing is to get to action, and action that are respected then by parents and by the neighborhood and that's why I particularly like that you're working in the community, not only with students but also with the whole community. Yes, it's no simple solution, I would say, otherwise we would already have organized something like that.
Chiara, this is potentially where you're at with rethinking education. Anonymous says, our tomorrow will be different than our today. Aren't we at risk of copying our current useful education systems rather than anticipating future needs? Chiara, any thought? And I'm sure Ursula most probably does have a couple of thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think it reminds me very much of something that our CEO, Stefan Germann, always says. Those of you who heard him speak may have heard this. And he says, AI won't replace teachers or doctors, but it will replace those teachers or doctors that are not using AI for better learning outcomes or better health outcomes. So in a way, we kind of have to rethink. I mean, I think we need to take a step back and really look at more what we think of as a systems view of life, and seeing where there are these connections and relationships that need to be better fostered. And I think that comes actually very close to also this climate change question and challenge, is once that we start to understand how everything is related, I think it makes what seems in the environment and perhaps very abstract really rather personal. And for us, actually, we see this as a great opportunity to also further involve young people in not only sharing the stage and hearing their ideas, but also bringing them, like Mohammed, and there are many Mohammeds out there, which is fantastic, but really sharing the co-creation, the shaping of that future education system together with them, whether it's through curricula or whether it's through learning from them. I mean, as somebody said, we've all been through education ourselves, and what better moment to take the opportunity of those that are just coming through this system and already start to understand, and also are starting to get also excited about the possibilities of technology and future progress, into the discussion and to the table to work together with them.
And perhaps there's a question for Chiara, Mohammed and Ursula here, which is how can we international actors hold governments accountable for education? Very brief answers, perhaps. And then I will give a last word to the Minister. Yes. How do we make sure that education is really on the priority list, I think, is what they're saying, and hold governments accountable for education? Chiara, Mohammed, Ursula.
I think it's through convenings like this. It's about bringing different parties together, sharing experience, sharing amazing stories of change happening in the communities and schools, hearing from young people themselves. And I think through this process of exchange and convening, and most importantly, listening. And so if there's one way we could help make governments more accountable, is finding ways to make them listen. And that's why it's also a privilege to share the panel with government representatives themselves.
Yeah.
As we already said, love, dignity, and respect. I believe when it is fully implemented, or when we have this kind of system of education with love, dignity, and respect, we will be able to have an enabling environment to hold government responsible.
Ursula.
Yeah, I'm a researcher, so it's evidence. And as a former secretary, I can tell you, if you have good evidence, it's better to convince the government to go in a certain direction. If you don't have any evidence, you are basically driven by opinions, and that's never leading to a good and better education system.
So, Minister, you can respond to what any of they said, their ideas for holding governments accountable, and perhaps I see there's a question about, and very briefly, what do we need to change? And that's a real summary question, isn't it, in order to be better prepared for future crises?
Yeah, comments first of all about two issues. The first thing, education is a basic human right, and that's a political statement, but it's true. And I think it's an investment in the future. It's a pillar in the development of any economy. So governments should be accountable for that issue. And regarding cooking educational systems, I believe if we follow problem-based approach or problem-solving, critical thinking, it is not important to address certain content. Students will become life learners by themselves. So I don't see that as a major problem in planning if we do the right thing at this time, prepare students for the future. And regarding the resilience of education systems, I said that putting learner inclusion and diversity at the heart of education post-COVID-19 is a must, and we should not leave anyone behind. This is a lesson out of COVID-19. And in Jordan, we believe that now it is a once-in-lifetime opportunity to not just rebuild after an emergency has affected children's learning, but to transform education, to build resilient systems so that they are better able to withstand future shocks. That's what I believe.
Thank you very much, and indeed there will be working sessions which are going to address many of those issues that you've heard on this panel. I'd very much like to thank our speakers for their insights, and I will follow you off the stage because we now have Nora and Lakina who are going to come on stage and they're going to report back on what the online audience has been saying so far. So please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for this very insightful conversation. We've been following up online what the whole online audience has been discussing. We've seen different, very interesting chats and people sharing insights in the Zoom chat, so thank you very much for your engagement, as well as on the Mentimeter. So if we can have the first cloud of the Mentimeter that we would like to present you. Perfect.
Awesome. So many questions were asked. One of those was, which sector do you work in? And as we can see, we have the international organization sector represented quite considerably, as well as civil society organization. And I think it's also worthwhile to note that we have 15% of students in the room, and otherwise quite a nice distribution. So it's really nice to see that interest in education and commitment to improving access, as well as the quality of education, is really present across different sectors. If we could see the second slide, we were also interested in knowing where people are joining in from. And as we perhaps can expect with the conference being located here in Switzerland, there is a large representation of Switzerland, but we also see that China is well represented, as is Kenya, North Macedonia, Indonesia, the Philippines, Brazil, Germany, Bosnia-Herzegovina. So really a wide variety of people. As I mentioned earlier, over 120 countries have registered to join in today.
Next question. We ask what is needed to make school systems more resilient to future challenges, which is also a topic that has been discussed by our speakers just before. And in the center, without that much surprise, I guess, investment and innovation as well as technology have been put in front. As well as taxes or free educations, there are a lot of people that have been answering, around 70 people per question. And as we heard in the panel, soft skills are also necessary. So you don't see them as big, but they are floating around. Collaboration, ooh, still people answering, amazing. But also teachers loving their work is something that I've been reading through, or mutual respect, make it collaborative, health consciousness. So I think there is a great complementary ideas that have been flowing through. Yeah, and as the very last question that we will give you an insight before having a break, we asked which future skills are needed to prepare for the uncertain futures we face. And in the very center, critical thinking. So I guess that we have like a lot of changes to make and new approaches to hear, and people of today are seeing like critical thinking as one of the main skills that are needed. And as we have also 15% of students being part of that online part, I guess this is also what they are requesting. But digital skills or creativity is also a very big one.
Yeah, resilience and adaptability. And you may perhaps important to notice that all of this data is being collected, will be analyzed and made available online also after the conference. So thank you so much for your contribution.